Hi, I'm Jenny Carnes, President and CEO of SanAntonioSports, and thank you for joining us for Game On, our podcast celebrating the 40th anniversary of SanAntonioSports throughout the year. This has been a fun ride because we've had a lot of really special individuals, conversations, and stories that have shaped the sports landscape in San Antonio. So today's episode is a little bit different. My partner, who is a board member of SanAntonioSports, Ullmann Japhet, she's on vacation. So I got to do what I wanted to do this morning. And I had the chance to invite in two very special people in my life for some unique storytelling. In our lead-up years, we prepare for the 2025 NCAA Final Fours. So welcome to Elena Stout-Wells. I'm going to say your full name for those of us that have been following the Final Four in San Antonio for many years. Our Vice President of National Events and Bids and currently serving as the Executive Director of the San Antonio Local Organizing Committee, always a mouthful, for the Final Four next year. And Wendy McCauley-Brand, coach of WMB Consulting, and also has an incredible resume and has been a part of SanAntonioSports, also serving as our former executive director of SALOC. So I'm going to use that going forward, SALOC, instead of San Antonio Local Organizing Committee, but served in that role for the 2002 Women's Final Four, which was our first, and the 2004 Men's Final Four. So welcome to you both. I think this is a fun conversation. How many days out are we from the Final Four?
260.
Today, 260 days. This will mark our fifth Final Four on the men's side. 2029 will mark our fourth women's Final Four. And we've had two Division I women's volleyball championships sprinkled in. So I'm counting next year because we're already in the thick of it. So that's 10 Final Fours that San Antonio has had the opportunity to host since 1998. And this is a very unique group that has had the chance to serve as the executive director of the host committee for the Final Four. We're missing one person who's not in the room today. Sandra Burke actually ran the LOC for the first men's Final Four in 1998. I know you worked with her.
Sandra Lopez Burke, if we're using our maiden names. Yes.
So, and I, just for reference for our audience that tunes into this episode, putting on these major national sporting events in the United States, there's only a handful of events that are on the size of a Final Four. The Super Bowl, CFP, some of the All-Star games for Major League Sports. So there's not that many people in this country that have had the chance to do what we've done. And it's almost this fraternity of people that have had a chance to run a Final Four or a Super Bowl, but these host committees and how much work goes into it. So I feel like there's this special bond between not that many people around the country. So that's the conversation we're going to have today. We've got some fun stories. We've got some interesting challenges that we all face in different ways in different eras of the event coming to San Antonio. So I want to start with and I'm going to start with you, Wendy, because you were first and you hired me in 2000 as we prepared for our first women's Final Four. So just talk a little bit about what got you to that role and what you've been doing since and how you're a part of it still.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know if listeners know what SALOC is, what that local organizing committee is, but the NCAA, in order to have a Final Four event in a city, a local organizing committee needs to be formed. And so we can talk more about that and what goes into that. But for me, I was 20-something when I came into the world of SanAntonioSports, and So my parents owned a temp agency, and the local organizing committee was looking for an assistant for the executive director. The executive director was Sandra Lopez, and I came in as the assistant to the executive director. So I thought I was going to be doing administrative things. As the inside circle knows, I didn't even know what the Final Four was, right? I had to Google if it was professional sports or collegiate, no joke.
There's only one sports expert in this room right now, and it's not the two sitting across from me.
Yes.
Better organizers than I am, but that's good.
So I came in 97 and helped run the 1998 Final Four alongside Sandra Lopez. And really, she really is the reason why, and with Susan Blackwood, of course, but Sandra gave me a chance, let me follow her around to all of the events. I got to see end to end how she planned that event. And so because I had that vantage point when Sandra decided she was going to move to Boston and get married, I went to Susan and said, and we'd been awarded the 02 and 04 Final Four events. And I went to Susan and said, I want to run 2002 and 2004. And she's like, well, we can't afford to keep you on staff. So this was 98, right? The Final Four had just happened. She said, go take a couple year break. If you're still interested in 2000, we'll hire you back. And so I went and worked at the Freeman Coliseum with Jaime Gonzalez and Derek Howard. And then I went to the San Antonio Convention Visitors Bureau. Steve Moore took a chance on me. And I said to him, when he hired me, I said, I have to let you know, if Susan Blackwood hires me to run the NCAA Final Four, I'm going to have to leave you. And he's like, if you get hired to run the Final Four, you can leave. And so I did.
All right, Elena, we'll let you go next.
Well, so I have a unique backstory in the world of sports, but I was never an athlete, always a manager. And I didn't realize that was something I can do in college, and had a great opportunity to serve as the business manager for the men's and women's track and field team at UTSA. And at the time, the coach there was James Blackwood, who is married to Susan Blackwood, and they kind
Our former executive director of
Yes.
SanAntonioSports.
Yep. And they kind of conspired between the two of them to have me do an internship during the summer at SanAntonioSports in between track seasons, and then ultimately stay on staff as I don't even know what I was, a semi-paid intern, a volunteer. So I got to, that was right around 2001 and leading up to the 2002 Women's Final Four. And I had a small role for that event. I worked in the NCAA office, helping them throughout that week. And I think that was really where I was hooked. It was just such a great experience. And I stayed on staff. And then in 2004, for the men's Final Four, I got to have the very exciting role of the clean zone, and I think we'll tell some fun stories about that.
We'll explain that one in a minute. Yeah,
exactly, and work on that. And really similar story. I had been on staff with San Antonio Sports, working kind of on the event sponsorships and marketing. And in 2006, when it was leading up to the men's Final Four in 2008, and Jenny had been named as Wendy's successor, I went to Jenny and said, I really want to work on this event, and what can we do? And so I took that opportunity to join the the staff, the SALOC staff, and that was for 2008 men's Final Four and 2010 women's Final Four. Since then, I've worked on both of those events. I too joined the San Antonio Convention and Visitors Bureau after the 2010 women's Final Four, and worked in marketing there for 5 years, and then came back for the 2018 men's Final Four. I left again and came back. So clearly I'm addicted to SanAntonioSports because I leave and come back. And I've been back since 2019, and I'm excited to have this opportunity leading into the 2025 men's Final Four and apply everything I've learned from these two wonderful women and great leaders in our community.
Well, I want to start with just how much the event has grown. And Wendy, you were on staff in 1998 for San Antonio's first one, and then running it in 04 and volunteering ever since. You've seen that growth.
Yes.
We've been more in the trenches of that growth in recent years. But I want to start with just the growth of how much the event costs to bring to San Antonio and to serve as the host committee. And Elena and I were talking about this the other day in a meeting, that I think our budget in 2004 for the men's was about $2 million, 2.8,
Yes.
2.4, something like that. And we're looking at quite a bit more for next year. And just the sheer number of people. The event used to be hosted in half of the Alamo Dome in the old Spurs arena configuration. Our last one in that configuration, we seated about 45,000 for 2008. And we'll be close to 70,000 next year for 2025. So I want you to just share your experiences in 98 compared to your experience in 2004.
Well, in 98, one of the responsibilities that I was given was I was actually the one responsible for the package holders. And so we gave locals an opportunity to buy in and get tickets through this package. And I also had the joy of picking out seats. And I didn't do the assigning, so nobody get mad at me if they had 98 seats they didn't like. But so just the level of detail and manual work that was happening in 1998, and maybe still does, but it was, all-nighters and just a lot of manpower that went into that. And then, fast forward to 2004, I think, and the NCAA was very involved in all instances. I mean, we were very well connected in 1998 to the liaison there at the NCAA. I guess my vantage point changed in 2004 just by having that entire scope. The number of volunteers grew. The number of tickets, I think, might have decreased. Like there were several different changes that even just from 1998 to 2004, that were visible to those that participated in attending the event and also putting on the event.
And how many people were on staff in 98 versus 94?
Right. So in 98, there were Krista, Byron, Jennifer, myself. There were 4 of us. And then the San Antonio Sports staff helped a lot in 98. And in 04, there were 4 or 5.
There were 4 of us,
yeah. And
we were a lean, mean team.
What amazes me most about that is when we got to 2008, there were 3 of us.
Yeah.
And the event had grown, and we didn't really grow our staff. We did a lot. And that we did bring on a couple of interns. That was back in the day of unpaid interns. So they were more like full-time volunteers. So we were a lean and mean
And how
5.
are you staffed now?
Today, we have 11 people on staff. We have 2 open positions that we're hiring for right now, and potentially 1 more.
Yeah.
Quite the drastic difference and change. And when I thought back to how much we did as such a small group back in 2008 and 10, and even in 2018, we had 8 people on staff, and to what our team is doing today, they're all busy. That we could all even still use more.
It's
people.
amazing what we pulled off in 2008, and we were like you when we were kids at that time, trying to figure out how to operate in that crazy world. One of the things I remember about 04 was the NCAA was just getting into growing the event outside of the games. So I think that was our first experience with a little music festival and more fan events, and the Fan Fest had grown bigger in the convention center. And then you think about what it is today and what you're working on. So talk a little bit about what to expect next year outside of the games themselves and how big that's gotten.
Yeah, I mean, a large part of our focus is outside of the games. And quite honestly, the game part, while it is complex, it is somewhat more of the easiest part to
3 basketball games.
Right,
yeah.
3 basketball games.
The ball tips the same for all 3 of them.
It's 10 hours in the Alamo Dome versus 72 hours outside of it. And so the growth of the March Madness Music Festival, I think, is what people recognize most. It's the 3-day music festival with headlining acts Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And, we really didn't know what to expect. In 2008, it was called the Big Dance, and it was a couple of days, and our headlining act was Kid Rock.
But who opened for Kid Rock?
That's right. 19-year-old fresh-faced Taylor Swift.
We like to think we launched Taylor Swift's career right here in San Antonio.
That's right. She showed up with her mom and her guitar, and with a lot of people asking, who is this?
Nobody knew who she was.
And so, that's where it started. And then when we saw it 10 years later as the March Madness Music Festival, Jason Aldean headlining, Kelsey Ballerini, Imagine Dragons, One Republic, Panic at the Disco, Maroon 5.
And we expect the same kind of talent next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to prepare for that. And that is free and open to the public. So when you think about the Final Four, everyone looks at the games, or the game tickets may be expensive or really hard to come by. But there's so much other programming that the NCAA really puts an emphasis on to give people the opportunity to participate in the event. And that's one of them. And part of our challenge is making sure that we deliver that in a way to the community so that as many people as possible can participate. And we take that seriously as we look at our footprint and where we place these events, because we don't want to limit it or to a certain extent. We want to be able to make it as accessible as possible. And then the Fan Fest itself has grown from probably one hall at the convention center to now 3 halls. And when you think of the Fan Fest presented by Capital One, that is the NFL experience at the Super Bowl. That is those huge activations, and you go in, and that event has a ticket. It's $10. Kids under 12 are free, and you can go in and do this whole immersive, interactive festival right in the heart of downtown and really be a part of the event as well. They're going to build a basketball court in there with 2,500 seats. They'll play some games. They'll bring in some USA basketball junior national teams and things like that.
I think that's a big difference that we, in 98, and even maybe 02 and 04 starting to drift away, but the local organizing committee we planned, like the hot sauce dip off was a party that we had for locals that had bought tickets to attend. So we were doing our own parties when they weren't happening yet. The creative design, right? We were in charge of the look and feel of the Final Four. We hired a local agency that designed Creative Link to go in and design everything from the banners, the pole banners,
and the logo.
The logo,
yes. Which we have zero control over now. But the local hosts used to be able to design the logo.
Yeah.
So those first the early ones came from San Antonio.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're lucky. We love our 2025 logo, but the NCAA takes complete control over that. They brand the event and put all the look and decor pieces together.
For the last 4 decades, San Antonio Sports has dared this community to dream big through the transformational power of sport. For 40 years, we've inspired youth to get in the game, motivated San Antonians to live healthy, been a force behind places to play, and hosted events that impact. As we celebrate 40 years of dreaming big, we invite you to dream big along with us. To support our mission, donate today at SanAntonioSports.org.
One of the things that will be interesting for our audience to learn is what goes on behind the scenes. You know, the general public sees the forward facing, the games, what's on TV, and all these fan events that Elena, you just described. But we all have been in the foxhole on this, right? And in different years, different decades, but there's always some crazy things that happen that nobody knows, the public doesn't see. You just roll with it. You call an audible. You go with it. So I want those stories from you guys on your experiences that you can remember.
I mean, mine experience was a lot longer ago than both of yours. Really and this isn't a crazy story, but really what I remember the most is the amount of people that came together to make it happen. And leaders from across the city, the volunteers people were giving their time to help plan this. And that was as a young, the most I'd led people is a Bible study that I led in my house, in my apartment. So to now be responsible for helping lead these volunteers, to create this huge event with the NCAA and really reporting to, our host institution, UTSA, the city of San Antonio, SanAntonioSports, and the NCAA, having 4 people that I reported to, that for me was just such, from behind the scenes, what people don't see, the planning of it, and really shaped who I am as a leader today because of what I experienced through that growth. But so not necessarily a crazy story, but just what was surprising to me having pulled back the curtain,
And just how many bodies.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about thousands. The leadership.
Yes.
But then you add in the layers of volunteer committee members, key volunteers, general volunteers, and we're talking 2,500 to 3,000 people that it takes to execute the event safely and successfully.
Yeah. But when you do all of that work, like for years, I started in 2000 for the 2002 Final Four, and then we had the 2004 2002 to 2004, 2 years planning. So sure, there were things. Did a radio get dropped in the Riverwalk? Yes. Did a barge? Well, I wasn't going to say names. Did a river barge stop, in the middle of the river? Sure. Did somebody lock the keys in the truck where all of the goodie bags were? Yeah. Did somebody sleep in? All that stuff happens, right? And so certainly they don't see that. But what for me, when I got to the day of the event, it's really all a blur because of all the work that was put in, and then seeing all of those people come into your city for just this great experience. That was the pinnacle,
Yeah.
I know you have some stories because I lived through them with you.
Yeah. Well, I would say one of the things that I think people don't really realize is the amount of time it takes. Like you talked about 2 years in planning, but this started
in 2018.
Back in 2017
when we
put the bid together in 2017. That's when the hotels are arranged for, and Visit San Antonio starts to do their work.
When the fundraising starts.
When the fundraising, we've got to start raising the funds, figuring out not only how we're going to put on the event, but how we're going to pay for the event. So this has really been a 7-year process in the making, and then really picking up and beefing that up in this last year. So that was one of the things, I didn't, when I was young and coming into it, like the week of or just working on the event, you don't really see all of those inner workings. It didn't just start last year, or, it started, and really we've laid the foundation in 2004, 8, 10 and now. So it's that long process. In my early days, I talked about the clean zone before. So that's the NCAA goes into every city, and they want to keep kind of a clean downtown of commercial recognition, so that the event look and feel takes precedence. And we're in a historic city here in San Antonio, so we protect our city and how it looks just on a daily basis, because that's important to us. But one of my most memorable things that people may not realize, and back in 2004, the main vehicle sponsor for the NCAA was Pontiac. And I got a call from the NCAA, their head attorney, and said, hey, there is a blimp in the sky. And it's a Saturn blimp.
And you need to take care of it.
Yeah, we need you to take care of it.
What do you do with that?
And I thought, well,
Let me refer to my blimp manual.
Yeah. And I was
not a manual for
23 at the time, and I thought, I'm not quite sure what you think I can do here. And so I called around. I called, and I was working with SAPD at the time. They were helping us kind of manage all of this, and they said, well, yeah, we've got someone up there in the blimp with them, and they're shooting the aerial feed for the broadcast. Are you sure you want them to come down? I said, yeah, maybe not. This is way above my pay grade. Let me call and do that. So it's things like that. You get those requests from all members of the NCAA where they're saying, can you take care of this? How can you help that? And so that the story of the people involved is really important, because we have to spend that time, establishing those relationships within our community to know who to call to say, hey, there's a blimp we need you to bring down.
Well, your clean zone story reminds me of another sponsor conflict that we had in 2018, the week of tip-off. It's Monday, and the first games are Saturday of that week, and the NCAA calls and says, you've got to cover every single Pepsi logo in the Alamo Dome because Coke is their soda, their beverage sponsor. And you start thinking about how many concession stands, how many fountains,
the fountain pours,
and a small group of us on staff, and the Alamo Bowl staff jumped in because they office in the Alamo Dome, and we went around the building, and it took us all night, but we covered every single
including
logo.
Wendy's husband.
Yes,
He was a volunteer extraordinaire to help us get that done before, and we had to do it before the teams arrived, because the NCAA really wants the teams to walk into this clean building, and
a lot of black stickers.
Yep.
You talked about working with SAPD, and it reminded me, leading into the women's Final Four, what we were coming off of the tail end 9/11. So
we were one of the first major sporting events after 9/11.
Yeah. So there were a lot of conversations about whether that event was going to happen or not. And then even just the Secret Service and all of the support that came on board to help us make smart decisions on how we made that a secure event was incredible.
Well, and I love that you bring that up, because one of the other questions I want to ask you both are just some of your memorable moments that really stand out, some of your favorite moments from being a part of Final Fours in San Antonio. And mine is the 2002 National Championship Women's Final in the Dome. That attendance record still stands today for a women's Final Four at 29,619, a number I will never forget. But that night, the American flag that flew over 9/11, or Ground Zero after 9/11, was brought in by the New York City Port Authority and presented during the national anthem. And you could have heard a pin drop in that building with 30,000 people watching women's basketball. And being a former women's college basketball athlete, I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it. And it was such a proud moment for us to say, look what we did for women's basketball in San Antonio. But to see that flag that was one of my all-time favorite sporting event moments.
Yeah.
I know y'all have one.
I really think I have a lot. I just feel so lucky to have been a part of so many of these events. And there's something from every year that has been special. In 2008, we got to host the Naismith Hall of Fame class. And that was
Patrick Ewing, Pat Riley, some big names.
Yeah, and spend time with them. That was a great moment. But like for me, the pinnacle was 2018, having worked so hard on the music festival in particular, and the growth of that was the fireworks at the end. Because if you've ever put fireworks on in downtown, it takes some effort and
a big fallout zone.
Yep, and just to see that event come together in a way that was safe, because we had such a big focus on public safety. That was in 2002 after 9/11, and the focus on that's only grown and intensified over the last few years.
And the Music Fest in 2018 happened right after the Las Vegas shooting. So we had to make some of those big-time security adjustments quickly around that. An outdoor concert.
To have it be Jason Aldean on stage, and he was on stage in Vegas when that happened, and that was his first outdoor appearance afterwards. Like, we really worked closely with the public safety team to make sure we had an event that was safe. So when the fireworks went off at the end, like, we had accomplished it. It was safe. And so that was my pinnacle movement, like literal tears coming down. And then we got to jump on the Ferris wheel, because we didn't have time all week, and enjoy a moment with our team kind of to close out that event.
Most people cannot say they've ridden a Ferris wheel with nobody else on it at midnight with nobody in the park. It was incredible. Just talking about security, the other story that really stands out to me was during the 2010 Women's Final Four. And Elena, you had been preparing and planning a college fair that we were hosting for high school senior girls, and 400 colleges and universities all over the country to come in and to give them an opportunity to think about their future. And we were so excited about this. We had a keynote speaker. We were feeding all 2,000 girls. We had hundreds of yellow dog school buses lined up to drop them off. And Elena gets down there really early to get this thing started. And we realized we can't get into any facility. Our credentials weren't working. The Secret Service had arrived, and then Vice President Biden decided he wanted to come watch the games, and they took over. And Elena had to move that event in about 30 minutes to a new facility, and it was just humbling.
We don't remember like how far things have come, but that was before, in 2010 was even before you walked through a magnetometer at every event. And so the Alamo Dome actually didn't even own them at the time. And so we were prepared to like show up with all of these girls, and they were going to go in and get to see the court and hear from their keynote speaker for about 30 minutes that morning inside the Alamo Dome, and then go over to the convention center. And when I got there at 6 a.m. and the girls were scheduled to arrive at 8 a.m. or 8:30, there were these magnetometers, and they had only had 2 of them set up. The rest of them were all around the building in boxes still, and the Secret Service.
I don't think we could run 2,000 people.
Yeah, and that's what they said.
mags.
Well, they've got to come through this door, and they've got to run through all of this. And I said, well, they only gave us 30 minutes inside the Alamo Dome to do this. I don't think we're going to make it. And so we called an audible and ended up walking the girls across the bridge, the connector, over to the convention center. And we were able to kind of shift over there. But that was just one of the nuances. Like, we were so excited to have a vice presidential visit.
And Condoleezza Rice was here that year.
Was such a big year, and it was so exciting. But then when you think about all the nuances that go into that, while we love our federal leaders to shine a light on these events, we also appreciate it when they stay
when they
home
don't come.
and,
Yes.
and
So we're all
watch
lighting
on
candles
TV.
that we won't have to deal with that next April, right?
Exactly.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, and we've got a lot of work ahead between the 3 of us over the past, almost 25 years. I know there's been a lot of tears. There's been a lot of 100-hour weeks, a lot of all-nighters, but there's been some really amazing moments that most people can't say that they were a part of what we've done for the city and the economic development around these events and what it brings to our community with our legacy projects and community programs. So it makes me proud to be sitting here with you both and knowing that I've gotten to do this several times, and hopefully we'll continue to do it, Elena and I together. But this has been fun. We end our podcast with one last question, and we'll keep our answers short because we want to wrap up. But what has been the transformational power of sport in your life? What has that meant to you, Wendy?
It has shaped who I am as a leader.
Good answer. It's short and sweet. Yeah. What about you, Elena?
Well, as someone who was never an athlete, but still given the opportunity to participate in sports, it's the same. It has changed my life. It took me from, a non-athlete with not a lot of self-esteem into an opportunity to lead, to be a part of a team, even when I wasn't, shooting the hoops.
Mm-hmm.
So that has meant everything to me. It has taught me so much about who I am as a person, and now who I am as a leader, who I am as a mother, and what's important for me and what I want my kids to learn.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun. I want to say thank you both for coming and joining us, and to our audience, please join us at the 2025 NCAA Men's Final Four here in San Antonio, whether you have a game ticket or not. As Elena said, there's a lot to do. We'd like to finish by thanking the San Antonio Express News for underwriting our 40th anniversary Game On podcast. Until next time, game on.